I'm Dave Thurm. I go by Thurm, too many Daves in the world. So I work for Central Federal Services. We are a billion-dollar company that provides information security and other consulting services to the federal government, DoD, any government agency you can think of, we have somebody in there. I primarily do all cloud stuff for them. I've been on multiple projects, their cloud offering. I'm actually auditing the cloud for a federal agency right now and deploying PIV. Anybody in the military have CAC cards? Those are the things that I'm actually deploying for everybody for authentication. My history is I used to work at UVSC on the help desk. Some of you out there were on the help desk with me, different days. I've worked at the UEN NOC, where I met Troy Jessup, U of U NOC. I built the Illini Cloud, which was a K-12 cloud. We had about, probably 10 states that were involved with us. We had about 10 million student records. And essentially we were giving away compute power for like $250 a year to a school district. So it was super low cost, aimed toward helping schools. It has since been defunct due to other reasons can't even know about. But I also help out in Illinois K-12. My local school district, if their guys go out of town, I become the on-call guy. I still like giving back to education because I feel bad for all those guys. So wherever I can help, I try to. So back in like 2000, I became friends with Troy Jessup as he was helping me with some firewall stuff. We had the Pixes back in the day. We worked on the first firewall deployment for the state of Utah because everybody was just using Rackles or absolutely nothing. And that's when you all had public IP addresses all over the internet. Which was a good time for hackers back then. So just as a disclaimer, all my opinions are my own, not my employer's. Oop. What did I do? There we go. Okay, so I went to DEF CON a long time ago. I was a kid. And this guy gets up there and gave the worst presentation I've ever seen in my life. So ever since then, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to tell people exactly what I'm going to cover and how it's going to be so that they can choose to leave or not whenever you want, or you'll be like, oh, this part is boring, but hey, I'm interested in network overlays or something like that. Or you can just laugh at my failures, which we'll have quite a few in here. The slides are definitely out of date, and I really did finish them up today. A lot of things have changed, and I'll point that out. Because if anyone works in the cloud, something's always being released. They're making modifications, and all 4 clouds that I work in are all scrambling, trying to take that leader spot. Right now I'm in Oracle Cloud, GCP, AWS, Azure, and I worked for a private company that was in Alibaba. If you guys have ever worked in Alibaba, it is very interesting. Some of the documentation is literally AWS documentation, where they found and replaced Alibaba for AWS. Okay, I did not know where to put this slide, but I want you guys to have this. This is how I learn things. I go at home and I build my lab so I don't look stupid at work. That's my philosophy, is cover up my stupidity as soon as I can. Okta Developer. You can get an Okta Developer account for free. You have to Google search Okta Developer though. And because I want to learn these things, but I can't afford them. I'm not rich and can't afford, Okta's probably like $5,000 a month to get in the door. You can run it on unlimited users, if I recall. And it's a great directory service, MFA, conditional access solution. And it's a lot simpler than the other ones that we're going to cover. I'm going to cover this primarily and Azure. AWS, it's been about 6 months since I've been engineering in AWS, so I forgot a bunch of stuff while I was writing the slides. So it's going to be more Azure, because that's what I was more familiar with. So GCP, Google Cloud Platform, is probably one of my favorites. It's pretty simple for me to understand. Of the ones, I think it's the easiest, for me at least. They have the $300 a month credit. I think it lasts for a year. You get $300 a month, or $300 for the year. Make sure you turn your stuff off. I had a $700 cloud bill one month I had to hide from my wife, and try to avoid those situations. AWS has their free tier. which is, they're T2, they're low instances if you just want to screw around. GitHub, okay. I worked on a DevSecOps team at SAP, and I'm not a programmer. I learned so much from these guys. And one of the coolest things is I put everything in GitHub now. I create my documentation, I write it in Markdown, and I store it out there. So anyone that wants to see something like how I did, let me say an example. Whenever I get onboarded to an organization, I go to the GitHub or the GitLab, depending on if it's on-prem or not, how you're doing things. And I create all my onboarding stuff, everything I needed to onboard. So the next guy that comes along, I'm like, hey man, here's the documentation for onboarding. Bam, here's everything you need to know. And then when I forgot what it was I needed, I can always go back and get it. So if you guys aren't in GitHub, learn it. If you're having troubles adapting to it because you're a developer and it's new, just force yourself to do it. It is amazingly cool. ClamAV, I see ClamAV everywhere on Linux systems. It's a requirement in the federal government that you run AV, and Clam tends to be it. Security Onion's another free one. Splunk. We pay Splunk guys a buttload of money, and if you're good at Splunk, you cash checks, man. So you can get a free, I don't know how much it is per day, but you can get a test environment for free. I think it gives you like 500 meg or something like that, which is plenty for your home lab. Take a bunch of the exams, some of them are free. They have free courses for veterans. A huge fan of Splunk, if I can afford it. If you guys haven't heard of Terraform, it is beautiful. This is if you're a network guy or a security guy and you want to get into cloud, and you're like, yes, the world is changing, learn Terraform. It is the way I automatically deploy cloud instances, storage, users, compute, load balancers, everything is deployed in a script, and it just goes. And then when I'm done doing whatever it is I'm screwing around with, I just destroy it, and it gets rid of all those resources for me. It's free. There is a commercial version, which I can go into detail on, but we'll kind of skip that. If you guys have got questions about the difference, I can hook you up with that later. But the not free stuff. I have a Palo Alto PA200 at home, which I scored for like $800. You get the lab edition. You can pick up a virtual lab license that runs on ESX for $150. MSDN accounts, see if work will buy you one. But it comes with Azure credits as well. Cloud Guru, if you guys have heard Cloud Guru, it is the best cloud training I've ever done. Bryce Coons hooked me up with it years ago, and it's beautiful. You want to get certified in something, it has hands-on labs that you do, and it has virtual machines you can test on. You just spin one up. You don't have to pay for the VM. Runs for 4 hours and kills itself. And then vMug Advantage is the ESX for VMware. You get all of VMware tools for $200 a year. I do that every year just because I never know when I want to test something. All right. Oh, the best part. Your children get no SLA. My network at home is my lab network, and when the kids get mad because I've taken down the internet because I'm switching between my Fortinet firewall and my Cisco, they just have to deal with that. And they do ping me really fast wanting to know what's going on. All right. Since a lot of this is going to be around government, just because that's where my brain is, this is where all the zero trust hotness has come from. It's the wrong president. It's Biden released this national cybersecurity executive order that pretty much told us we all had X amount of time to come up with a plan. And then they said, yeah, X amount of time to deploy zero trust throughout the entire federal government. And I was building these slides. I was like, oh, Colonial Pipeline was on May 7th. And then a couple of days later, we get the executive order. Definitely something may be there. All right. This is probably the most true meme I have in here. So let's go over the mindset of zero trust. Mitigate unauthorized privilege escalation. We don't want somebody to get on a box, escalate their privilege, and then bounce somewhere else. Our goal is to limit that. So we also want to build out a hierarchy of, say, some compute, some resources we have are more sensitive to others. Active Directory is like the Holy Grail. You got your network devices. These are things we want to separate and segment off and protect them from abuse and people getting into them. And then we also want to finely tune who talks to what. Do my users need to talk to my DNS server? Yeah. But do they need to talk to it on port 22? No. They get port 53 UDP. They don't need TCP because they're not doing zone transfers. So finally restricting all the servers down and services as far as we can. Assume breach of other components. This is the hardest thing you guys are going to have to overcome, is how do I secure one part of my network when I don't trust the other part? How do I migrate to securely when I don't know if somebody's compromised? Big thing is we're just going to lower or lessen the attack surface. The attack surface of the user and the attack surface on the server itself. Explicit validation of trust, everybody's going to be verified. Any action is going to be tied to me or my device or both. It's tying the action to a person now. Least privilege, which we're all familiar with, we don't want everybody having access to stuff they shouldn't have access to. And then to force out the security policy through your entire organization is another tough one. But it's standardization and making sure everybody plays by the same rules. Okay, first thing we do is we're going to identify what's valuable to us. What do we protect? PII, which is common. I put classified data here, but when I did my review with my buddies, we did sensitive data. So classified data for me is anything that has a data classification as secret, top secret, compartmentalized. It could be sensitive, internal use only, not for public consumption. Those are classifications. The reputation of organization. If you're a bank and you get hacked and that gets out, that pretty damages your reputation. And then also, if your data gets compromised, it also damages all of your customers as well because they are tied to you. Especially if you're one of those organizations doing like a SaaS offering and you get compromised and your customers use it, you've lost all of their data. And big part behind Zero Trust is credential protection. It's assuming somebody's credentials have been compromised, and if they are, how do we mitigate the risk or add further security onto that? So going through this list, we have identified what is most valuable. I picked one of the exact stories I got as Social Security numbers. When I worked at, I assume this has changed, UVSC, I found all the students' Social Security numbers, names, birth dates on a database in the auto lab. Don't ask me why it was there, but it was there. So I guess knowing where your stuff is pretty kind of important. Directory services. Once people have access to your directory services, you're pretty much toast. Network layer. You guys saw the Facebook outage? What would it have been like if it was a miscreant that actually got in and took those route tables down? They would have had a lot harder time finding out what the problem was because they wouldn't have known where to start, and they couldn't even get into their doors because their doors were all network connected. So they put all their eggs in one basket. SCADA systems, which is like your door system, which should have been separated, or your AC units. These are kind of important things, like the oil pipeline I mentioned. I'm 99% sure they did not compromise the SCADA system. They only compromised the billing system. So there was still oil. They just didn't want to sell it to anybody because they couldn't go back to pen and paper. I often think about Cloud Console. How do I protect my Cloud Console or my API access? Platform security tools. What happens if somebody gets a hold of your Nessus scans and they're able to pull all of your records? Why do a port scan when you pull all the stuff straight from Nessus? PKI infrastructure. I'll talk about this more. I've spent a lot of time in PKI. It scares the crap out of me. If you do not secure that and build it right, it's bad news. External partners. Any of you guys connect to from like WAN links to partners or have these back doors for people? I've seen them everywhere. I got to know where my data flows, and do I trust my neighbor, or do I need to do more inspection, DLP inspection or threat inspection on those? Here is what is now old school Microsoft recommendation for deploying. This is their Red Forest, they call it Enhanced Security Admin Environment, I think is what it's called. Essentially, you have 3 user accounts. Everything's broken up into 3, so 3 admin accounts. Tier 0 has the most security. You're going to have your PIV, your multi-factor authentication. You're going to go through all these extra steps. You have your Tier 1, it's just working on your servers. You're probably going to do MFA and regular creds. And your Tier 0 is just your normal users. You're logging in from a user computer. Do you trust that computer if I'm doing help desk? Oh, heck no. How many of you guys put keyloggers on your high school computers when you were in high school to pull the admin password? Yeah, I know one of you in particular became a domain admin once doing that. And when questioned by the principal, he says, who says that? Who says I got domain admin? Here's some identity services. Okta is pretty popular. Duo, I didn't throw them out here. That was the easiest one for me to get into. It's free. I think it's $30 a month if you just want basic support. Keycloak is the Red Hat directory services. They're like really tight together. They're in the federal government everywhere, probably because of that Red Hat relationship. AWS has their directory service, and Azure. And Azure, like a lot of the cloud stuff, it's not free. Like they give you a little taste, and then everything else that you actually want, like security features, they're going to charge you for it. One of the things I want to bring up is how AD is not secure out of the box. I've had many incidences of people went to Azure AD, did a hybrid join, and they never secured Azure AD. And then they get compromised. They get compromised bad. Because once you're into AD, if it's not configured correctly, they just run rampant throughout your network. Remember this, everybody remembers the SolarWinds exploit. Well, the exploit was trivial. If you talk to CrowdStrike, if you can get them to, I don't know if it's public or if it's classified, but they did this walkthrough for us. That was amazing. That showed us exactly how it all worked, and it was horribly easy, and it put the fear in me pretty bad. So LDAP. How many of you guys are still running unencrypted LDAP? And how many of you know how much a pain it is to actually get it to encrypt and get the whole thing working? Super big pain. It's like encrypting syslogs. Super pain to do to get it set up. But once you've done that, you now have encrypted syslogs. Because a lot of what we do now is people will send syslogs across the internet to a cloud SaaS provider like Splunk has their cloud. Do you want those going raw open in the wild? Then the relay attacks, Keycloak. There was, I see it around. I'm not real familiar with it. It's open source, so it doesn't have the same love as the other ones get. And then Okta. Okay, so I'm going to go through here. For Okta, here's some of our choices. So they have their threat insight. When we're doing conditional access, they're going to look at some things. They're going to look at where am I coming from? Is this normal behavior? Am I coming from a foreign country? Have I traveled between one country and another country more than 600 kilometers an hour? That's actually the setting, I think, in Okta, is you can set how far time travel is. So if a user's over here and then all of a sudden they log in over here, physically impossible, you automatically get flagged. To add the behaviors here, they are pretty sweet. You just, easy. Drop-down menus, choose what device. Country blocking. You can figure out how many countries to block. I think that a Netscope, I want to say they had like 30 countries they blocked out of the box. I pretty much block anything that I don't do business with. There's no need for me to have it. So Azure Conditional Access is based on, they have time-based, so users can only log in at certain times, where you're at, device compliance, Intune. So part of conditional access is it ties into your workstation. Is this workstation joined to the network? Is this, what are some other things? You can test on all sorts of things on the device side. It's kind of like NAC for conditional access, network access control for conditional access. MFA for admin roles and management task, and you can select what role gets what security measure for login. And then risk-based login. And these are the screens. If you're in Azure, just search conditional access, and it will pop up these screens that I kind of have here to the right. And they'll show you who to grant access on, who's approved, is the device compliant. So if you want Windows Defender, which is a requirement of Azure conditional access if you want the advanced features, it will actually check to make sure your AV is up to date and your patches are done and all of those things. You can base different rules on different applications. Sign-in risk, pretty straightforward. All right, here's my good slide. I found a bunch of slides out on like Microsoft's website, and they were just way too confusing for me. So over here on the left side, you have your workstation users, you got your devices, and you got Tweak folks. So Tweak is the bad guy. He's somewhere in the room probably. But he is a miscreant, whatever we call bad guys now. And first thing he does is he gets conditional access. It's going to ask the workstation, are you a valid workstation? Are you domain joined? Okay. Who are you? Are you using a tablet, or if you're a bad person? If you're coming from an evil IP, so once it goes through conditional access, it hits evil IPs and says, oh, Tweak, you're coming from Romania. I'm just going to block you, you're done. Anything from that's a bad IP address, bad geography, low-hanging fruit, it gets rid of. And then I have the voodoo slide. So every vendor that does conditional access has their voodoo. It's their little magic twist on threat intelligence that it goes off of. And, oh, you match this threat intel, and it's high risk, they just kill your condition. But if you're a known location, you're a known user, and it fits up with your username, so it's your standard username, and you're trusted, it's just going to send you to AD. There's less friction to log in. The more triggers you put off, it will scale and say, oh, you came from somewhere you don't normally log into. I'm going to make you do MFA. Or it's going to say, hey, you're domain admin. You're logging as a domain admin from a known IP, which I'm cool with, known location, your device is up to date. You're an admin, though. You're getting a PIV. You're getting a Yubikey with a certificate on it for authentication. So I use Yubikeys. In the federal government, we use cards. It's like something card access system. Oh, yeah, I wrote it down. I'm smart. Common access card. If you're in the military, you guys all have one to get on base. Here's a trick that I used on a project I had. I wanted to do PIV authentication for an entity. And I wanted to do it simple because I didn't have a lot of time. And that was pretty much my main motivating factor. So I spun up this Linux box. It was a Red Hat box running Apache with mod security, and I set up as a reverse proxy. I was then able to configure it to prompt for PIVs. So the certificate on the Yubikey. If somebody tries going to this URL, which machine DNS lookups, and you don't have a CAC or a Yubikey in, it just gives you an error page like not found. But if you do have one, it checks the cert, because the PIV presents the certificate, then you're prompted for a PIN, type in your PIN that's tied to your Yubikey that only you know, and then you're redirected to the internal server, where then you're prompted for the application login. So if you wanted to get Nessus credentials or have Nessus behind a PIV authentication, this is a super sweet way to integrate it into any web app. Low effort to do once you've done it the first time. First time sucks, but the other times I've done it a lot easier. Yubikey, huge fan. If you're going to buy one, buy the FIPS 141, because there may be an instance where you have to be FIPS 140-2 compliant. So just buy those. They're like $60 or something. One slide. So I want to show you how easy this is. On the card authentication tab, so you run the manager on your machine, you click the card authentication, you generate yourself a certificate, a CSR. Then you go over to your Active Directory box. And on your AD box, if you have a certificate authority, I just did the AD one because I'd done it recently. You just do your CSR, you have a template, Yubikey has great instructions for this. So you have your template, you run your CSR like here, I even put the commands in the bottom line. After I created my Yubikey template, I do the CSR, then it dumps me out a certificate, and I install that certificate onto my Yubikey. I left a warning because I really wanted to get ECC to work, elliptic curve, but I ran into some problems. It's not really supported out there by a lot of things, and it kept being a hindrance in some of the things I wanted to do. I also discovered that Chrome doesn't support 512, and I think it supports just 256 now because they said in theory it wasn't worth the additional time to compute like the 384 or the 512 key because nobody can crack it unless you're rolling a quantum computer. This is something you guys probably all face. I'm assuming that probably half of you are the strong, hard outer shell with a soft, gooey marshmallow center on your networks. So we're going to cover how to cover those with micro-segmentation. I'm making good time. It's good. So if you've worked in the cloud, you got network security groups, and I cannot remember what AWS calls them. Essentially, they're ACLs. They're layer 3 ACLs. They are not stateful. They just do, in this case, the first one I have, I'm allowing somebody from this IP address to go to anything on RDP. It's a /32, so it's a 1-to-many rule, and it will allow it. This is probably what everybody uses today, 90% of you. And your system admins are doing it because it's easy. They don't know any better, and I can deploy a box in 5 minutes. And the firewalling in Azure or AWS to buy one native is probably, I don't even remember, several $100s a month, I think, to get an Azure firewall. Always before you deploy something, check the price, or you'll be like me, and I did make a $400 mistake once. What I'm going to show you guys in the next couple slides is actually how we deploy a next-gen firewall in the cloud, which is not the firewalls that are provided today by the cloud services. I know Azure is talking about something, like they kind of have their next-gen thing going, but it is so buggy, it drove me insane. And when I'm running 4 clouds, do I want my SOC to run 4 different firewalls? So what I've pushed for is standardizing on a platform, whether it be Palo or Fortinet, or all depends on what your price point is. So with the layer 7 firewalling, we're actually tying it to every user by using that app ID, which is Palo Alto's term, that ties every user connection to the Active Directory. I get their rights, and I can set policy in my firewall that says, okay, Dave can get to this list, or this group of people can get to this device. Those are tightly tied in. I can block on the usual TCP UDP ports. And here's the tricky part that was not available until recently, simplified. AWS just recently released the ability to protect east-west traffic, but primarily you're only protecting north-south traffic, leaving your network with firewalls. That's the way they all pretty much exist in the cloud. And it is kind of a pain, but I'm going to show you guys how to do it on how to get all your east-west, because I don't want all my stuff talking to each other. I don't want my web servers talking to my database servers they shouldn't talk to, or my sys servers, any of those things. All right, hopefully you can guys see this. So this is another one. This is the gotcha. This is how I deployed Palo Alto. And it took me forever and about 4 phone calls with Microsoft, who in the end, once I figured it out, they're like, oh yeah, that sounds like it will work. Because I want to protect east-west. So I've split up these VNets. There's 3 of them there on the left, and they have their network security gateway, which is their layer 3 ACLs. They have a VRF, which I don't know if that's a VRF. They call it a user-defined route, which is pretty much saying static route. Because if you don't have static routes in here, and you're not confining network security groups to a static route, they can talk to everybody. They hit the global pool, and they can talk to everything east-west. So the linchpin of this to forcing your traffic through a firewall is user-defined routes. Had to figure that one out. So I add my routes for my virtual networks, and I do a default route to the transit network. You have to have a transit network, which is going to be your inside of your firewall interface. So I point everything default that way. And then once they hit there, I create another route that defaults everything to the inside interface of the next generation firewall. And here's the gotcha that burned me for like a week. For user-defined routes, I wish I would put a slide in here for you guys, but I didn't. You go into the compute part of the firewall, and you look at the network connection, the network interfaces. There is a drop-down in network interfaces to add the user-defined route to that network interface. There's no real documentation out there for it, but once you do that, then that puts, I would say, that VRF, that interface in the VRF, so everybody can get to it. And the other gotcha I got from my guys the other day, they called me and they're like, I can't get my firewall working. It was another group. Well, he had set on the outside interface, what IP address do you put on the outside interface? It's always the public IP, right? Not in the cloud, it's not. Because we forget that you're natted by AWS and Azure. So you put the inside, the private IP address that Azure has given you, tied to their public IP, that is the IP address that goes on your external interface. Does not make sense to us network guys, but that is a gotcha that burned me as well. And if you want to do it in redundancy pairs, you just do load balancers in front of how it between firewalls. Network overlays. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these. I am annoyed at all the network differences between all of the clouds. I don't like security groups. I don't like how they do routing. There's a lot I don't like. Illumio is a commercial product. I haven't on my next slide. We'll give better pictures, but essentially, you go into your server, you run a PowerShell script that installs this agent on your machine, and that agent phones home to a central server. From that central server, you say DNS servers can only talk on port 53, web servers can only talk on port 80, and if you have it in like listen mode, it will show all the communication on your network. It'll show who's talking to who, what they're saying, and it also gives the ability to do one check mark IPsec tunnel between devices. I can IPsec from my DNS server to my users, instant encryption. Slack released for their internal use, this is on their GitHub. This is the one we've been messing with. This is Nebula. It's open source. It's not as pretty. Our drawback with it is the Golang does not support FedRAMP High encryption, so I can't use it for stuff I'm using. But it's pretty cool to mess with. You could even set up private networks between you and your friend's house with this tool. Internet is something real similar. I have the least experience with this, but it's essentially Nebula with WireGuard, which does support the higher encryptions. And here may be a better picture. I don't know if you guys can see it from there. You assign with Illumio, you put like machines or machines that go together in their own box. And only these can talk to each other. And this group of machines can only talk to them. If you want to go micro-segmentation in an afternoon, use this tool. You just set up rules and it's completely done, but it is essentially your software firewall on your machine, whether it's Windows Firewall, IP tables. I think Firewall D is probably what it's now. In Zero Trust, let's do it easy. Let's not kill ourselves. Let's default everywhere we can to secure protocols. If I can SSL it, let's SSL it. If I can encrypt LDAP, let's just do that. These are the easy, low-hanging fruit that we can do. SSH, I still see Telnet on people's networks, still exist. I think 2 years ago, I spoke about DNS over HTTPS. I assume everybody's familiar with it by now, where it's encrypting your DNS request. So if I encrypt my DNS request that goes to Pornhub or something, notice my return is going to be a CDN. Well, my firewall that blocks adult material doesn't realize what that is because it's just giving me a CDN IP. So it's an immediate bypass. Firefox released DNS over HTTPS as default, and everybody went into panic because at that point we found that everybody could bypass my filtering, my blue coats and all of that. And even support within those systems was not really supported a long time ago. It was still kind of a black hole. Alternatively, DNS over TLS. I see a ton of open DNS communication, not DNS, database communication that is not encrypted. By default, my sysadmins, my database admins are not enabling that. And I believe it's just one little checkbox. Oh man, I'm killing this, I'm fast. So there's no more silos. I want everybody to know you're really not alone. We're getting rid of silos. Security people have always been outside. We got to work our way inside to the people who actually do the work and work with them to get on board. Be active in the community. My work, we have communities and what we call domains. So every 2 weeks, somebody gives a presentation like this to refresh ourselves, and we have subject matter experts come in from different groups throughout the organization. Huge thing, security mentor somebody. If you got somebody in the organization who's interested in security on the help desk, like Troy found me on the help desk at UVSC, mentor that person and bring them up and train them in the way. And your system engineers need help. They want help. They may not always ask for it because they tend to be pretty busy, but reach out to them and offer to aid them in securing their stuff, because security guys tend to be the expert of storage, servers, network, because we have to know it all. We have to know at least a little bit about everything. And it should be easy for us to ramp up on specializing in securing LDAP and become the experts in that and reach out to systems guys and say, hey, I got time on Friday. Do you want to go through this? And we'll just get you deployed securely. Working with them rather than assigning them a ticket is probably going to have better results. My thing for the company, we're hiring. We got a $3 billion initiative for Cloud First, and that is B with a B, billion. We have 624,000 employees worldwide. I work on a team, my department, I think we have, or my group is probably 11,000. I did some search on the other day to see how many job openings I had. Throughout the whole world, I got 14,578 that responded to information security as a description. I have some stuff. I got a little bit of time. I threw this at the end. Let me see if I put these in order. You guys, I didn't just throw these in. I knew I'd run short. Privileged access workstations. I got some time. We'll cover this. This is the biggest thing I have to push in the cloud. I do not want somebody logging in from their work PC into anything in the cloud that is even remotely sensitive. I don't know what malware they got on their box. They are the weakest of the link is the people, as we found through all the phishing that we run into. With privileged access workstations, we use AWS Workspaces. Azure has like a remote desktop solution or something they use. But imagine a machine you log into the cloud of VDI that is yours. It has your PuTTY settings. It has a request PIV for you to authenticate to the machine. This is how we were able to do it. We log into your box, essentially it's a personalized Bastion host. All privileged accounts, or privileged accounts and privileged servers can only be accessed through these boxes. We have a workspace box for domain controllers and one for regular servers, and so you got the separation. You're not using the same box on two different layers. Biggest thing about this is it reduces the attack surface. If we limit the stuff that can get on that inbox to just these boxes, and these boxes are locked down tight. They have zero internet access. They get all their updates from our internal repos. There's no web browsing. Pretty much it's a dumb box, like Bastion hosts are supposed to be. And so far I've not seen Spotify installed on one, like I have on a jump box. Oh, Azure AD. Everything costs money, guys. If you want any of their advanced stuff, any of their privileged identity management, their PIM, their one-time passwords, you got to pay $9 a month, kind of the deal. Risk events evaluation, a lot of their logging, and to get that secret sauce or that voodoo, the risk-based conditional access, you have to pay for that. And those are my things. I think I had one here. Here's my example of privileged access. This is how I designed out how to handle access to Nessus, where I have my security engineer, he goes through an external firewall. This is my early design. And through the OpenVPN, because we originally having everybody do OpenVPNs. From that VPN, to get into Nessus, you would be prompted for your PIV, your hardware token. And then from the hardware token, there'd be a firewall rule allowing that privileged access workstation only allowed to the Nessus front end. Because I don't want that paw, there's no reason for it to get to the back end of Nessus, the database that has all of your information in it. So using a layer 7 firewall, I was blocking that. So the only communication was between Nessus and its backend through a different policy. And I limited the paw only to port 443 on the front end, and they would get 2 prompts. They would get their PIV, and they would get their login to Nessus specifically. We could change that, but for something like this, I would have it the tightest security I had. And those are kind of my extra slides. I'm like, got any questions for me? Was it overwhelming? Yeah. It is automation of Docker deployments. So if I want to deploy like 26 Docker containers, Terraform will, I create my script, I tell it how to create them, I set all the parameters that Docker needs, the AI, AMI, all of that stuff, the API creds, and I hit run, and it will deploy all 26. And it will have it do its thing, and then it will shut down and kill all those. Because for me, Docker is, for what I use it for, is short-term use. I want something, and I just want to do a dirty task real fast. That's what I use Docker for. I don't ever use it for like sustained applications. Although a lot of people use it for web servers, which I think is probably pretty solid, but they kill those web servers every, hour or whatever and rebuild them. Anybody else? All right, I'll let you guys go. Oh, way in the back, sorry. I use oil because my face gets dry. And yeah, I got this stuff that keeps it from going frizzy. Beard shampoo is where it's at, guys, and conditioner. Make sure, if you can't grow a big beard, starts itching, condition it. Yep, that'll fix your problems. Thanks, I appreciate it.